couple weeks ago, I posted a question on my Instagram and I got a response that really caught my attention. How to get plot when you only have setting/world building. This is a different approach to how I've created books in the past, and I thought it was an interesting exercise for me to think about. What would I do personally if I had started with world building and went on to build a plot and characters from there? This is part 2 of the video, so if you haven't seen part 1 yet, I will leave it up in the cards and also the description box down below. Alright, so just like last time, I'll be assuming this is about a fantasy project, and going forward, I will consider this as if it were my own project. So I will say the things that I would do in this situation, and of course this is just me applying my process to the idea. I do label myself as kind of an extreme outliner, but I will try and make this video as helpful to other kinds of writers as well. In the previous video, I talked about how I would narrow down ideas to figure out the mood of the story, the basic genre, and kind of the age and sort of a few details about the main character. Now we'll move into more figuring out plot events and figuring out a little bit more about the main character. So I'd start again with a blank page and lots of questions. The 3 main ones being, who is your character? What is their problem and why haven't they solved it yet? And what events are going to force them to face it? And that's basically your whole plot right there. No, but really, this will get you a lot further than you think. So I would take into consideration where their place in this world that I've created might be. Maybe they're the princess, or maybe they are a shoemaker or a jewelry seller. Wherever it is that I feel like they could clash best with different elements that I've already created would be a good place for me to put them. So if the political system in the world is the most interesting thing to me and I wanted to really explore that in my story, I might then decide that the princess could be the best character to tell the story through. They might have the best lens to sort of see the world in the way that I want the reader to experience it. Or maybe you'd want to focus on the stable keeper who is actually planning a rebellion against the Empire. Sounds kind of Star Wars, but alright. So you can see how even though these 2 examples might be set in the exact same world, you could have 2 very different lenses to see the story through depending on who your character is. And since this exercise is about what I would do if I started with world building but didn't have a story yet, I would use that to my full advantage. And I would try to think about what things I already have in my world, what I want to show my reader, and where these different elements that I have could clash to create interesting conflict. Alright, so next, what is this character's problem and why haven't they solved it? I would take this character and figure out what is their problem. What is wrong with their life? Maybe they experienced something tragic like the death of their family or a beloved friend. Maybe they're on the run from something, or maybe they have some kind of mystery to their past that they need to solve. Whatever it is, main characters usually gotta have something wrong with them, and that is pretty much always tied to your inciting incident. There is, of course, always an exception to these kind of guides. If you're writing like a serial mystery/detective story, like, I guess James Bond or Nancy Drew, then you don't really have your main character having a lot of issues in character development over these things. They're way more of a static character, so it depends. But as I said, we are talking about a fantasy project here, so that probably wouldn't be the case in this situation. So next is, what event forces them to face this issue? What is something that is so world-altering to this character that I could make happen that would push them to resolve this problem or at least face it? What outside force might push them into a situation where their personal problem can make things so much worse? Or at least what will push them forward and start this journey of theirs where they will eventually have to face this problem. Figuring this out is really the key to the inciting incident for me. Next, where could things go wrong? What kind of trouble could your character get into that would force them to try and solve the problem but in the wrong way, and thus make the situation worse for them and the people around them? How could these bad events become even worse? So now this is the point to really start using the world building that you have and looking at it and figuring out what kind of external problems you can come up with for your characters to face. Maybe your character is a human, but there's an elven war going on in the north. So if your human character is trying to find his brother, but you already have world building for an elven war going on, how can that make things harder for your human character? Maybe his brother was last seen in one of the elven territories, and that is definitely a place that he doesn't want to go right now, but he has to. Or maybe your character just finally finds this plant that they've been looking for, but then they accidentally wake up an ancient spirit who curses them. Just figure out how the characters might interact with the world you've already created, and take those elements and manipulate them. But most importantly, how do these events force your character to develop? How could these events change the way your character sees things, or do the thing they've been avoiding this whole time? Every writer is different, and we all go through different stages in our writing journey and our abilities and our capabilities. If you're feeling stuck or unmotivated or overwhelmed, maybe try outlining. I speak from experience here. I used to think I was a pantser. I would sit down and I would write and I would make pages and pages of story, but I've always felt this underlying sense of confusion and just sort of a lostness? I was constantly second-guessing all the words that I was putting down, and it didn't feel like the most enjoyable process a lot of the time. I didn't feel like I knew where I was going, even if I had some general ideas and a plan. I still felt like I was missing something. So I learned more about outlining, and I tried it, and I haven't gone back since, to the point where now I call myself an extreme outliner. What I'm trying to say is that if you are really stuck, or you really are struggling to make the words go, try something different. All these questions should really be steering you towards figuring out your inciting incident, and the rest of the plot from there really stems from it. So that is just such an important jumping off point. I really think that in this situation, getting a really good understanding of your main character will really help you start being able to stitch your different ideas together. This is just a really interesting topic and exercise for me. I like trying to understand different ways that people do things and trying to think about how I could apply those ideas to my own process. I'm just always so focused on the characters and the details of the events first that I never really get into the world building until later on. I mean, yeah, I have ideas for these kind of things early on and I work on them to the point where it's helpful to figure out the events of the story and the character arcs and such, but it's not always kind of the first thing that I think of or that I go to when I'm planning out a story. So character and plot really just go so hand in hand. So it's sort of hard for me to say which actually goes first, but it's kind of both. So a couple of my favorite easy to digest plotting resources are Save the Cat by Blake Snyder and Save the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody. I recommend reading the original book first. If you're not familiar, Save the Cat is a book about screenwriting, and Save the Cat Writes a Novel is that book but adapted by a novelist for novelists. So even though the original material is about screenwriting, I still think that it lends some really helpful insight into the second book. I would recommend anybody read the original Save the Cat before the Save the Cat Writes a Novel. And then for YouTube, I again recommend Sarah Cannon's Plot Your Novel series here on YouTube. It is a super helpful guide and has definitely influenced even the way that I outline my own books. A lot of her questions on the character sheets are ones that I've integrated into my own process. And of course, Brandon Sanderson's lectures are all available here on YouTube. They are definitely a wealth of knowledge. I'm interested to know if you guys start with world building. Have you ever started with world building? Is that something that a lot of people do and I just find it a totally different idea? Like how does that work for you guys? If you'd like to read some of my work and dive into my world of Alexia, you can start with Age of the Gods, which is a free short story over on my website. I'll leave the link down below if you'd like to read it. You know, it is a bit of world building in itself, detailing the time in Alexia's history when the gods were at war. So if that is something you're interested in, again, leave it down below. I guess that's all I got for you, so thanks for watching. Bye!